I remember the first time I saw Owen Larkin. It was one of those blistering summer days, the kind that leaves you feeling sticky and tired. I was part of a dental outreach program, traveling to rural communities to provide free checkups. We were set up in a small town hall, the smell of antiseptic mingling with the earthy scent of hay and soil that drifted in through the open windows. "Hey, you must be Marin," a deep voice said, snapping me out of my thoughts. I turned to see Owen, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. He had this easy smile, the kind that makes you feel like you've known him forever, and I couldn't help but smile back. "That's me," I replied, wiping my hands on my scrubs. "And you must be Owen. Thanks for helping us set up today." He nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "No problem. My boys are getting their checkups, so I figured I'd lend a hand." As we worked, I found myself drawn to his warmth and the way he spoke about his sons, Finn and Leo. There was a kindness in his voice that resonated with me, a promise of family that I had been yearning for. But there was something else too, a heaviness that lingered in his words, like an unspoken burden. Later that evening, Owen invited me to dinner at his family's farm. I was eager to see more of his world, to understand the life he was offering. The farmhouse was charming, with its creaky wooden floors and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. I was introduced to his parents, Gladys and Harold, who greeted me with polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. As we sat down to eat, conversation flowed easily at first. Owen's sons were delightful, Finn with his curious questions and Leo with his shy smiles. But beneath the surface, I could feel an undercurrent of tension, especially from Gladys. Her eyes flicked over me like she was assessing an intruder. "So, Marin," Gladys said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter. "How do you find farm life? It's quite different from what you're used to, I'd imagine." I hesitated, feeling the weight of her scrutiny. "It's definitely different," I admitted, trying to keep my tone light. "But I'm enjoying it so far." Gladys gave a thin smile, her gaze unwavering. "It takes a certain kind of person to handle it. Not everyone's cut out for this life." The words hung in the air, and I felt a flicker of doubt. Was she right? Could I really fit into this world, or was I just fooling myself? After dinner, I overheard a conversation between Owen and his mother. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their voices carried through the open window as I helped Finn and Leo with a puzzle in the living room. "She seems nice," Owen was saying, his tone defensive. "Nice isn't enough, Owen," Gladys replied, her voice low but firm. "This isn't just about you. It's about the farm, the boys. We don't need someone who'll run at the first sign of trouble." I felt a chill run down my spine. Her words were like a slap in the face, a reminder of the uncertainty that loomed over everything. My heart ached with the desire to belong, to prove that I could be part of their family. But now, doubt had crept in, whispering that I might never be enough. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Owen had seemed oblivious to his mother's concerns, but I couldn't ignore them. Was I really ready to give up my career, my life, for a chance at something that might never be mine? I stared at the ceiling, the shadows shifting in the moonlight. The promise of family had drawn me in, but now it felt like a fragile dream, one that could shatter with the slightest touch. I wanted to believe in it, to fight for it, but the path ahead was uncertain, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to walk it alone. As sleep finally claimed me, I knew one thing for sure. Things were about to change, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. Little did I know, the seeds of doubt planted that night would grow into something much more complicated, setting me on a path I never expected to walk. Life on the farm turned out to be a lot harder than I'd imagined. The days started before the sun was even up, with the rooster's crow acting as my alarm clock. I'd stumble out of bed, still half asleep, and dive into a never-ending list of chores. Feeding the animals, collecting eggs, and tending to the garden became my new normal. It was exhausting, and I felt like I was constantly playing catch-up. Owen was always busy, his focus entirely on the farm. He'd leave early and come back late, covered in dirt and sweat, with barely a moment to spare for a conversation. It was like living with a ghost, present but distant. I tried to talk to him about my day, about how hard I was finding everything, but he'd just nod, his mind clearly elsewhere. One afternoon, as I was struggling to fix a broken fence, Finn came over, watching me with those big, curious eyes of his. "Do you miss your old job?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I paused, wiping my brow with the back of my hand. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I wanted to be here, with you and Leo." He nodded, chewing on his lip thoughtfully. "Grandma says you might not last, that you're too soft for this." The words stung, even though they were just a child's innocent observation. I forced a smile, ruffling his hair. "Well, I'm tougher than I look." But the truth was, I wasn't so sure. Gladys's words echoed in my mind, feeding my insecurities. She seemed to take every opportunity to point out my shortcomings, her disapproval hanging over me like a dark cloud. I tried to brush it off, to focus on the boys and making a home here, but it was hard not to feel like an outsider. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I found myself in the kitchen with Gladys. We were preparing dinner in silence, the only sound the rhythmic chopping of vegetables. I could feel her eyes on me, weighing and judging. "You know," she said finally, breaking the silence, "Owen's late wife, Sarah, she was a natural at this. Took to it like she was born for farm life." I nodded, unsure of what to say. It felt like a comparison I could never win, a shadow I could never step out from under. "She knew how to keep things running smoothly," Gladys continued, her tone almost nostalgic. "It's not easy, managing all of this." "I'm trying," I said softly, my hands stilling on the knife. She gave a non-committal hum, turning back to her task. "Trying is good, but sometimes it's not enough." Her words lingered long after the conversation ended, gnawing at my resolve. I wanted so desperately to prove myself, to show that I could be part of this family. But with every passing day, it felt like I was slipping further away from that goal. A few days later, something happened that shifted everything. I was in the barn, struggling to stack hay bales, when I overheard Owen talking to his father, Harold. Their voices were low, but the barn was quiet enough for me to catch snippets of their conversation. "She's not cut out for this, Dad," Owen was saying, frustration evident in his tone. "I don't know if she can handle it." Harold grunted, the sound of him shifting his weight audible. "You chose her son. But maybe it's time to rethink things. The farm needs someone strong." My heart sank. It was one thing to face Gladys's criticism, but hearing Owen's doubts cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to confront him, to demand to know if he really felt that way, but fear held me back. What if he agreed with his father? What if I wasn't enough? Instead of confronting him, I threw myself into the work, determined to prove them wrong. But it was like trying to fill a bottomless pit. No matter how hard I worked, it never seemed to be enough to change their minds. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something had to give. I couldn't keep going on like this, pretending that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. I needed to find a way to bridge the gap between us, to show Owen that I was in this for the long haul. But as I drifted off to sleep, a new fear crept in. What if I was fighting a losing battle? What if the family I wanted so desperately was slipping through my fingers, and I was powerless to stop it? The uncertainty gnawed at me, leaving me restless and anxious. I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew I had to find them soon. Because if I didn't, I risked losing everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of. And that was a reality I wasn't ready to face. The attic was a place I'd avoided since moving in. It was dusty and cramped, with cobwebs hanging like ghostly curtains. But Owen had asked me to find some old photo albums, so there I was, sifting through boxes that hadn't been touched in years. I was about to give up when I stumbled upon a small, unmarked box tucked away in the corner. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it out, blowing off the layer of dust. Inside, I found a collection of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The handwriting was neat and familiar, and as I read the first letter, my heart sank. They were from Sarah, Owen's late wife. Her words painted a picture that was both intimate and haunting. She wrote about feeling trapped, about the unyielding expectations from Owen's family, and the pressure to be someone she wasn't. It was like reading my own fears and doubts laid bare. The letters revealed a side of Owen's family I hadn't fully seen, a toxic undercurrent that had quietly eroded Sarah's spirit. She spoke of feeling isolated, of being judged for every decision, every misstep. It was a mirror of my own experience, and the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was still processing this when Owen called from downstairs, his voice pulling me back to the present. I quickly tucked the letters back in the box and hid it behind some old clothes. As I descended the stairs, my mind was racing. How much of what Sarah wrote was still true? Was I heading down the same path she had? That evening, the tension in the house was palpable. Owen seemed distracted, his mind elsewhere as we ate dinner in silence. I wanted to confront him, to ask about the letters, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I watched him, searching for signs that he was aware of the storm brewing around us. After dinner, I found myself alone with Gladys in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, her movements methodical and precise. I hesitated, then decided to take a leap. "Gladys," I began, my voice steady. "Did you know Sarah felt overwhelmed here?" She paused, her hands stilling in the soapy water. "Sarah was sensitive," she said finally, her tone dismissive. "Farm life isn't for everyone." But she felt trapped. I pressed, my heart pounding, like she couldn't be herself. Gladys turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "We all have our roles, Marin. It's about knowing your place and doing what's necessary." Her words lingered long after she left the room, a chilling reminder of the expectations that weighed on me. I felt a growing sense of urgency, a need to protect myself and the boys from the same fate that had befallen Sarah. The next day, while Owen was out in the fields, I called Joy. Hearing her voice was like a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone. "Joy, I found something," I said, keeping my voice low. "Letters from Sarah." She was struggling just like I am. Joy was silent for a moment, then she spoke, her tone firm. "Marin, you need to think about what's best for you and the boys. If things are as bad as they seem, you might need to leave." Her words echoed in my mind, but the thought of leaving was terrifying. I'd worked so hard to build a life here, to be a part of this family. But now, I wasn't sure if it was worth the cost. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had to change. The letters had opened my eyes to the reality of my situation, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. But how could I confront Owen without tearing everything apart? The next morning, I decided to talk to him. I found him in the barn, repairing a piece of equipment. He looked up as I approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "Owen, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. He nodded, setting the rag aside. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I found Sarah's letters. She was struggling, Owen, just like I am." His expression shifted, surprise giving way to something darker. "Those letters were private," he said, his voice tense. "I know," I replied, my heart racing. "But they're important. They show a side of this family that's hurting us." He looked away, his jaw clenched. "This farm is everything, Marin. It's my legacy, my responsibility. But what about us?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "What about the boys?" He didn't answer, and the silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. I realized then that the farm would always come first for Owen, no matter the cost to his family. As I walked away, my mind was made up. I had to protect myself and the children, even if it meant leaving behind the dream I'd fought so hard to build. The letters had been a wake-up call, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. It was time to take action before it was too late. The days seemed to stretch endlessly, each one blending into the next as I wrestled with the decision looming over me. The letters from Sarah had opened my eyes, but they also left me with a gnawing sense of urgency. I needed to protect Finn and Leo, to shield them from the same toxic dynamics that had consumed Sarah. but leaving was easier said than done. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, my head in my hands, Owen walked in. He looked exhausted, the day's labor etched into his features. He paused, sensing my turmoil, but said nothing. Instead, he grabbed a beer from the fridge and joined me at the table, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. "You've been quiet," he said finally, his voice gruff. I looked up, meeting his gaze. "There's a lot on my mind." He nodded, taking a sip of his beer. "Farm life will do that to you." I wanted to scream, to make him see that it wasn't just the farm. It was everything, the expectations, the unyielding pressure, the feeling of being trapped. But instead, I just nodded, the words refusing to come. The next morning, I found myself in the barn with Finn and Leo. They were playing with a litter of kittens, their laughter a balm to my frayed nerves. Watching them, I felt a fierce protectiveness surge through me. I couldn't let them grow up under the same shadow that had suffocated Sarah. "Mom," Finn said suddenly, using the word he'd started calling me, though it still felt new and fragile. "Why are you sad?" I crouched down, pulling him into a hug. "I'm not sad, sweetie. Just thinking." He looked up at me, his eyes wise beyond his years. "About leaving?" The question caught me off guard, and I hesitated. "Why do you ask that?" He shrugged, glancing at Leo. "We heard you talking to Grandma. She said you might not stay." My heart clenched. Gladys's meddling was more insidious than I'd realized. "I'm not going anywhere without you two," I promised, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Later that day, as I was hanging laundry, Gladys approached, her expression as unreadable as ever. "You're causing quite a stir," she said, her tone light but with an edge that made my skin prickle. I folded a sheet, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm just trying to do what's best for the boys." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The farm is what's best for them. It's their legacy." "Maybe," I replied, meeting her gaze. "But they deserve to choose their own path." Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of something dark passing through them. "You're not the first to think you know better." The implication was clear, and it hit me like a cold wind. Sarah had tried to change things too, and look where it had gotten her. But I wasn't Sarah, and I refused to let history repeat itself. That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts churned. I knew I had to act, but the weight of the decision felt like a mountain pressing down on me. I needed to talk to Owen, to make him see what was at stake. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The next morning, Owen announced that he was considering pulling Finn from school to help more on the farm. The words hung in the air like a death knell, and I felt something inside me snap. "Owen, we need to talk," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. He looked at me, confusion etched on his face.
About what?
"About the boys, about us," I replied, my heart pounding. "This isn't working." He frowned, setting down his coffee. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to speak the truth. "I found Sarah's letters, Owen. She was struggling just like I am. This farm, your family, it's suffocating." His face hardened, a wall going up between us. "Sarah had her issues. And so do I." I shot back, my voice rising. "But this isn't about me or her. It's about Finn and Leo. They deserve better." He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You think taking them away is better?" "I think giving them a choice is better," I said, meeting his gaze. "They shouldn't have to live with this pressure." The silence that followed was deafening, and I realized I'd crossed a line. But I couldn't back down now. The stakes were too high, and the boys' future hung in the balance. As Owen turned and walked away, I knew the time for waiting was over. I had to act, to protect the children and myself from a life that would only lead to more heartache. The decision was made, and there was no turning back. The only question was how and when. And deep down, I knew the answer was sooner rather than later. The morning started like any other, with the sun barely peeking over the horizon as I dragged myself out of bed. My body felt heavy, weighed down by the decisions I knew I had to make. I moved through the house like a ghost, my mind racing with thoughts of the future and the uncertainty that lay ahead. I found Owen in the kitchen, already dressed and ready for the day. He glanced up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded, setting down his coffee cup. "About what?" "About Finn and Leo," I replied, my heart pounding. "And about us." His eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "What about them?" "I don't think pulling Finn from school is the right decision," I said, choosing my words carefully. "He needs to be with other kids to learn and grow." Owen sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The farm needs him, Marin. We all have to pitch in." "But at what cost?" I asked, my voice rising. "He's just a child, Owen. He deserves a childhood." He shook his head, his expression hardening. "This is his legacy. He needs to understand that." The conversation was going nowhere, and I could feel the frustration building inside me. I wanted to make him see, to understand that this wasn't just about the farm. But the wall between us felt insurmountable. Later that day, as I was tending to the garden, Gladys approached. Her presence was like a shadow, always lurking just out of sight. "Owen tells me you're causing trouble again," she said, her voice laced with disapproval. "I'm trying to do what's best for the boys," I replied, not bothering to hide my frustration. She gave a small, dismissive laugh. "You think you know better than us? This farm has been in the family for generations. It's not something you can just walk away from." I straightened, meeting her gaze. "Maybe it's time for change. For the boys' sake." Her eyes flashed, and for a moment, I saw something like fear in them. "You're playing a dangerous game, Marin." The words were a warning, and they lingered in my mind long after she walked away. I knew I was pushing boundaries, challenging the status quo in a way that hadn't been done before. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was running out of time. That evening, as I sat in the living room with Finn and Leo, the weight of my decision pressed down on me. I watched them play, their laughter a bittersweet reminder of what I stood to lose. I couldn't let them grow up in an environment that stifled their potential, that forced them into roles they didn't choose. The next day, I received a call from Joy. Her voice was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. "Marin, I've been thinking," she said, her tone cautious. "If you need a place to stay, my door is always open." Her offer was tempting, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But the thought of leaving, of uprooting the boys from the only home they'd known, was terrifying. "I don't know if I can do it," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "You have to think about what's best for you and the children," Joy replied gently. "Sometimes that means making tough choices." Her words echoed in my mind, and I knew she was right. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would work out if I just stayed the course. The time for action was now, before the situation became even more untenable. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the house creaked and settled around me. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of actually doing it filled me with dread. I was on the brink of a decision that would change everything, and there was no turning back. The following morning, as I was preparing breakfast, Owen walked in, his expression tense. "We need to talk," he said, echoing my words from days before. I nodded, bracing myself for the confrontation. "Okay. I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his tone guarded. "About the boys." "And?" I prompted, my heart in my throat. He hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Maybe you're right. Maybe they need more than just the farm." The admission was unexpected, a crack in the facade that had kept us apart. But before I could respond, Gladys entered the room, her presence like a cold wind. "You're not seriously considering this, are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Owen glanced at her, then back at me, his resolve wavering. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely audible. The moment of vulnerability was gone, replaced by the familiar tension that had become our norm. I realized then that I couldn't rely on Owen to make the right choice, not with his mother's influence looming over him. As I watched them argue, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I couldn't wait for Owen to change, to see things my way. I had to take matters into my own hands for the sake of my children and the future I wanted for them. The decision was made, and I knew what I had to do. It was time to leave, to build a new life where the boys could thrive, free from the shadows of the past. And this time, I wouldn't let anything stand in my way. The morning air was crisp, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside me. I had spent the night tossing and turning, my mind a battlefield of fear and determination. I knew what I had to do, but the path ahead seemed fraught with obstacles and uncertainty. I found Owen in the barn, his back turned as he worked on repairing a piece of equipment. The sight of him, so absorbed in the farm, only fueled my resolve. I approached, my footsteps barely audible over the rustle of hay. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned, wiping grease from his hands. "What is it, Marin?" I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I'm leaving, Owen. I'm taking the boys." His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to anger. "You can't be serious." "I am," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "This isn't the life I want for them. Or for me." He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You think you can just walk away? This is their home." "It's not a home if it feels like a prison," I shot back, the words sharper than I intended. The silence between us was thick with tension, each of us unwilling to back down. I could see the hurt in his eyes, but I couldn't let it sway me. "Not now." "You're making a mistake," he said finally, his voice low. "Maybe," I admitted, "but it's my mistake to make." I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest, when his voice stopped me. "What about the farm? The legacy?" I paused, glancing back at him. "I can't sacrifice my happiness or the boys' future for a legacy. They deserve a choice." As I walked away, I felt both liberated and terrified. I had taken the first step, but the road ahead was daunting. I had no idea how I was going to make it work, but I knew I had to try. Back in the house, I found Finn and Leo playing quietly in the living room. Their innocence was a stark reminder of why I was doing this. I knelt beside them, my heart aching with the weight of what I had to say. "Boys," I began, my voice soft. "We're going on an adventure." Finn looked up, his eyes wide with excitement. "An adventure?" "Yes," I said, forcing a smile. "We're going to visit Aunt Joy." Leo's face lit up, and he clapped his hands. I love Aunt Joy. Their enthusiasm was infectious, but it also made the reality of our situation hit home. I was uprooting their lives, taking them away from everything they knew. But I had to believe it was for the best. As we packed a few essentials, I felt a pang of guilt. I was leaving behind more than just a house. I was leaving behind a dream I had once cherished. But dreams change, and mine had become a nightmare. Just as we were about to leave, Gladys appeared, her expression a mix of disbelief and disdain. "You're really going through with this?" I nodded, my resolve unshaken. "I have to." She shook her head, her eyes cold. "You're making a big mistake, Marin. You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, echoing my earlier words to Owen. "But I have to do what's right for us." Her gaze lingered on me, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something like regret. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the familiar mask of disapproval. As we drove away from the farm, I felt a mix of fear and relief. The road stretched out before us, a path to a new beginning. But the weight of uncertainty hung over me, a constant reminder of the challenges ahead. When we arrived at Joy's, her warm embrace was a balm to my frayed nerves. She welcomed us with open arms, her home a sanctuary from the storm we'd left behind. "You did the right thing," she assured me, her voice a steady anchor. I nodded, though doubt still lingered in the back of my mind. "I hope so." As the boys settled in, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were safe, for now, but the future was still uncertain. I knew Owen wouldn't let us go easily, and the thought of what might come next filled me with dread. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of agency over my life. I was no longer a passive participant in my own story. I was writing a new chapter, one where I could build a life on my own terms. The journey ahead would be difficult, and I couldn't predict what challenges we might face. But I was ready to fight for the life I wanted for myself and for the boys. And that, I realized, was the first step toward true freedom. The city buzzed with life, a stark contrast to the quiet isolation of the farm. It was a new world, filled with possibilities, but also uncertainties. Joy's apartment was a refuge, a sanctuary where the boys and I could begin to heal. But even here, the shadows of the past lingered, a reminder that our journey was far from over. I was in the kitchen, trying to focus on making dinner while the boys played in the living room. My mind kept drifting back to the farm, to the confrontation with Owen and the look in his eyes when I told him we were leaving. It was a mix of disbelief and betrayal, emotions that mirrored my own. Joy entered, her presence a calming balm. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice gentle. I shrugged, trying to muster a smile. "Better, I think. It's just a lot to process." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You've been through so much, Marin, but you're stronger than you know." I wanted to believe her, but the weight of what I'd done was still heavy on my shoulders. I was about to respond when the doorbell rang, its chimes slicing through the air like a warning. Joy exchanged a glance with me, her expression suddenly tense. "I'll get it," she said, moving toward the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her open it, revealing Owen standing on the threshold. He looked different, the usual confidence in his stance replaced by something more vulnerable. "Marin," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and desperation. "We need to talk." I hesitated, glancing at Joy. She gave me a small nod, a silent reassurance that I wasn't alone in this. "Okay," I said finally, stepping forward. "Let's talk." We moved to the balcony, the city lights twinkling below us like stars. The air was cool, a gentle breeze ruffling my hair as I faced Owen. "I didn't come here to fight," he began, his voice subdued. I need to understand." I crossed my arms, trying to steady my racing heart. "Understand what, Owen?" "Why you left," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Why you took the boys." I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Because I couldn't stand by and watch them become trapped in a life they didn't choose. I couldn't let them lose their childhood. He nodded slowly, pain flickering across his face. "I thought I was doing what was best for them. For us." "I know you did," I replied, my voice softening. "But sometimes, what's best for the farm isn't what's best for the family." He looked away, the weight of my words settling between us. "I didn't see it. Not until you left." I felt a pang of sympathy, but I couldn't let it sway me. "Owen," I found Sarah's letters. She felt the same way, and it destroyed her. He flinched, the mention of his late wife a sharp reminder of the past. "I didn't know," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know she was so unhappy." We stood in silence, the city noise a distant hum. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the realization that he had been blind to the pain around him. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry for everything." The apology hung in the air, a fragile offering of peace. I wanted to accept it, to believe that things could change, but the scars were still too fresh. "I need to do what's right for the boys," I said, my voice firm. "They deserve a chance to find their own path." He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "And what about us?" I hesitated, the question catching me off guard. "I don't know," I admitted. "I need time to figure that out." He reached out, his hand brushing mine. "I just want you to be happy, Marin, whatever that means." The sincerity in his voice was unexpected, a reminder that beneath the layers of tradition and expectation, there was still the man I had once cared for. "Thank you," I said, squeezing his hand. "I hope you find happiness too." As he turned to leave, I felt a sense of closure, a chapter ending as a new one began. The confrontation had been painful, but it was necessary. It had forced us both to confront the truths we'd been avoiding, to face the reality of our choices. Back inside, Joy was waiting, her expression a mix of concern and relief. How did it go? I smiled, the tension in my shoulders easing. Better than I expected. She nodded, pulling me into a hug. You did the right thing, Marin. You're on your way to finding peace. As I sat with the boys, watching their carefree laughter, I realized she was right. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced my fears and come out stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. And for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that everything would be okay. Life in the city slowly began to feel like home. The boys settled into their new school, their laughter echoing through Joy's apartment as they shared stories of their day. Watching them thrive was a balm to my soul, a confirmation that I'd made the right choice. I found work at a local dental clinic, the familiar routine grounding me in this new chapter of life. The days were busy, but they were filled with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. I was building something new, something that belonged entirely to us. One afternoon, as I was leaving the clinic, I spotted a familiar figure waiting outside. It was Owen, his posture more relaxed than I'd ever seen. He wore a tentative smile, and I felt a flicker of surprise at the change in him. Marin, he greeted, his voice warm. Can we talk? I nodded, gesturing for him to join me at a nearby cafe. As we sat down, the air between us felt different, less charged with tension and more with understanding. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Owen began, his gaze steady. About everything. I listened, my heart open but cautious. What have you realized? He sighed, glancing out the window before meeting my eyes again. I was holding on too tightly to the past, to the farm. I thought I was doing it for the boys, but I see now it was for me. His admission was unexpected, a glimpse into the transformation he'd undergone. The boys are happy here, I said softly. They're thriving. I can see that, he replied, a hint of sadness in his voice. And I'm glad. I want what's best for them and for you. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. Thank you, Owen. That means a lot. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. It was a moment of closure, a chance to lay old ghosts to rest. I've decided to sell the farm, Owen said suddenly, his voice steady. It's time for a new chapter for all of us. The news was a shock, but it felt right. The farm had been a source of both joy and pain, and letting it go was a step toward healing. What will you do? I asked, genuinely curious. He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. Maybe travel, see what else is out there. I've been so focused on the farm, I've forgotten there's a whole world beyond it. I nodded, understanding all too well the need to explore new horizons. I think that's a great idea. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We were both moving forward, each on our own path, but connected by the shared love for Finn and Leo. Back at Joy's, the boys were waiting, eager to share their latest adventures. I listened, my heart full as I watched them, their joy infectious. Later that evening, Joy and I sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling around us. You seem lighter, she observed, her tone teasing. I laughed, the sound genuine. I feel lighter. It's like a weight has been lifted. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. You've come a long way, Marin. I'm proud of you. Her words warmed me, a reminder of the strength I'd found within myself. I had faced my fears, confronted the past, and emerged stronger for it. As the night deepened, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. It had been filled with challenges and heartache, but it had also taught me the true meaning of family and the importance of standing up for what I believed in. The future was still uncertain, but I was ready to embrace it, confident in the knowledge that I had the strength to face whatever came next. The next morning, as I prepared breakfast, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Owen, his handwriting familiar and comforting. Inside, he expressed his gratitude for the time we'd shared and his hopes for the future. It was a heartfelt apology, a promise to be there for the boys in whatever way they needed. I smiled, tucking the letter away. It was a reminder that healing was a journey, not a destination, and that forgiveness was a gift I could give myself. As I watched the boys play, their laughter filling the room, I knew we were going to be okay. We had found our place, and with it, the family I had always yearned for. The journey wasn't over, but it was one I was ready to continue, with love and hope guiding me forward. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all.